Welcome to that spiritual, actual, factual answers to questions you're asking. You find them inside you, recite you, reciting the records of cash. We laughing, we drafting the passion to vary. It's time for that comedy, dramedy, all of the fanciest, catchiest acronyms. Listeners, listen, we traveling. Conscious is always unraveling. The reading you're having is mapping you back to your natural habitat. Abracadabra, it's magic, let's passing it. To top it off, the host, all the classiest. Now, what were you asking for? All of the answers, what? All the answers.
I just got off of teaching from 10:30 to right now, which is 5:15, and we're going on Zoom. And so we're going right into a Zoom podcast.
Welcome to this world.
I feel fine, actually. I feel centered and good and calm, but it's definitely more Zoom time than I'd like to be.
Yeah, those are not great days by the end of it.
Yeah, it's rough.
I don't mind it much of the time. There's all like, Zoom fatigue, but yeah, it can wear on.
I mean, it's for real Zoom fatigue, don't you think?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. I think I'm a little more like, I enjoy it because I have fun. There's a lot of fun things that happen, when it's all over, you're like, oh God, I feel traumatized.
Yeah.
And drained.
I've actually had times where I'm like, you've seen me when I've had like, I'm going to faint feelings. I
shouldn't laugh at that. That's terrible.
I know. You hate me. You want me dead. No, you
a little bit.
Oh, yeah, no, just like really big reactions to it, really toxic reactions sometimes where I'm like, I either have to go outside, strip off all my clothes and lay in the grass, or I have to like get naked, get in the shower immediately because I'm so like something about the energy of the computer or the whatever. I don't even know. It just gets so intense sometimes.
No, I feel you.
So yeah, we have Amy coming on today, my friend Amy Siriporn, who I'm very excited because how regularly I reference human design.
Yes.
Amy is one of two people that I send people to when they need a human design reading, which is regularly with my clients. I'm constantly referring people to her and to my other friend who do it. And Amy is I'm comfortable calling her an expert. I don't know if she'll feel comfortable saying she's an expert, but man, does she know a lot of stuff about it. And yeah, she's deeply steeped in it. So I'm stoked we're going to get to kind of...
Well, I mean, if she's giving people readings, I would hope she's partially an expert.
She's deeply an expert. Yeah. It's just she's a humble individual. So I don't know.
Sure.
And also, that's the thing, though, about human design is that you can be expert level compared to you and I, and be nowhere near knowing all of it.
Sure.
Like it's such a huge, broad and deep field with so many details that, I mean, decades of study can get you almost to where you know something.
So like we should have, just like in like Dungeons and Dragons, you have different levels. Like she's an expert, not a master.
Okay, I like it. She's a wizard.
Mage. She's not a mage yet.
Right. She's a starting out wizard, level 1 wizard, not a mage. Can't cast any spells.
Probably a few, but maybe can't transmogrify.
Oh, fair enough. What's a more evolved species, a mage or a wizard?
This is like two people pretending we kind of know what we're talking about in the D&D
Aren't you?
Fantasy realm. No, I'm such a dabbly nerd. I think a lot of people might think I'm a nerd. Like when I was a kid, like the people that I kind of vibe with definitely were like, oh, of course I play Dungeons and Dragons every weekend. And I read The Lord of the Rings 5 times and all those things. And I'm like, I never actually read Lord of the Rings. I listened to the books on tape one time on a road trip, and I read The Hobbit a few times, but I know it well. And like I played D&D, let's say several times.
Okay.
But I was not living that life.
Right. This brings me back to, remember we had that conversation a bunch of episodes ago about, are you a dweeb?
No, are you an asshole or a creep?
Nerd? A creep or an asshole?
Or a creep, yeah.
Right. I am 100% an asshole.
Right, that's an 8. 8s are assholes.
Yeah.
2s are creeps.
Right.
But see, we're all, and if we're going to bring that up, we have to like lay it out that there, just like in the Enneagram, there's the shitty version of it that sounds bad. Like, why do I have to be one of two terrible things?
Yeah.
Asshole or creep. But creeps are really sensitive. They care about other people. Assholes are get shit done, like moving the things forward. But like at our best as a creep, I'm a creep. Yes. I think threes are creeps, but they're also assholes because they're achievers.
I think threes are assholes.
But certain threes, certain type, maybe like social threes or something like that are creeps, because I know I'm a creep who's really been developing his asshole. Not a phrase I was expecting to say today.
Listen, I don't think anybody listening to this thinks that we're saying 100% you're an asshole or whatever.
Of course not.
We're just saying when you default to your worst qualities, are you more in the realm of creepy or are you more in the realm of asshole?
See, I will even push back on that. I don't think it's even delving into your worst qualities. It's just delving into your sort of core nature and the jokey. It's a slightly flip way of phrasing it, but it's still kind of true. There's just like any personality types. There's the superpower of it and there's the problem of it, and they're both true.
I guess I just even that I go like, it's not even a problem.
It just is.
Yeah, because
and there's a third category: people who hate that delineation. Boy, there are people who will vehemently reject it. They'll be like, "Fuck you! I don't want to play that game."
So when people vehemently hate it, don't you think that makes them an asshole?
This is a total bullshit theory, but those are the creepy assholes.
Why?
Because creepy assholes are scary. I think some creeps are hate it because they don't want to. No, it's a creep or an asshole. Because creeps we shouldn't delineate ourselves by
it's how you
negative framing, or an asshole's like, fuck you, I don't want to do that.
Okay, yeah.
They both hate it.
It's an ontological question. It's a question of being. It's how you're doing it, not what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's not the content, it's the how.
Yeah.
I like it. We're getting down to some stuff.
Yes. In it.
In it, indeed. Can I say something wildly inappropriate? Great, because I'm gonna.
Hi, this is a podcast with Katie Rubin. It's also called Wildly Inappropriate.
I just want to say, I've said this sentence many times in my life. You know how when you have a really good thing happen, in that moment that it happens, or shortly after it, you think, or the way your memory works is that you're like, that was the best. Let's say you had a great ice cream cone.
Okay.
Yesterday. And you're talking to me today about it.
I seriously thought you were going to talk about taking a really good shit, because that would be the general context of that.
Yeah, I'm not there yet, but I'm getting there. It's not shit, but it's close.
Okay, great ice cream cone.
So
better.
You have the best ice cream cone. You have a great ice cream cone yesterday. Now, if you say to me, if you're going to tell me about it, you might hyperbolically speak about it and say, I had the best ice cream cone of my life, because you're not remembering 6 months ago or 3 years ago that other amazing ice cream cone you had.
Right.
Right?
Right. Because it's more current. It's more present.
Right. Simple. Right. So similarly, I've had some terrible sex in my life.
Okay.
And I've had some amazing sex in my life. And I've had average sex. I've had all the kinds of sex you can have. I had some of the best sex I've ever had recently. And I want to talk about what made it good.
Good. This is where it gets spiritual, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I was crying about, I don't remember what, some girl thing. I was a lady and I had a feeling and I cried. And my man friend, Newman Manfredson, was comforting me and being so generous and gentle and kind with my upset, having no reaction to it himself, just like, no, babe, and then I was like, and I feel bad that I'm in a bad mood and you have to comfort me. And why do I have to be upset? And why can't life be easier? And he just was like, I don't have the expectation that this should be easy all the time. When did you think life would be easy? And I was like, I always wish that I'm trying to make it easier, and everything is hard, and I work hard it's easy, Anyway, so it was like I was sad, but then I was like feeling bad that I was sad because it's ruining the night. He had none of that going on. He was just like loving. The combination of like my heart was really open from the crying, plus he was so just there and available and non-judgmental and generous and loving during my sad moment that I was immediately turned on. Because I guess that's obvious, right? But in a way, for me, it's like I'm always surprised and reminded by how intimately connected emotional openness, vulnerability, breakdown, saddiness, how connected that is with sexual intimacy. Do you share that experience?
100%. Yeah. I was nodding on an audio podcast, so that didn't help.
Well, I think, so if you agree, I think my question that I would pose would be like, and this is such a 8 question. Like, this is such a question of like normal people who aren't me are probably like, that's a really dumb question. But I'm like, how do I get myself to have such an open heart all the time where I don't have to be breaking down and sobbing and having a terrible day for the heart to be that open? I tend to have to like really like everything's falling apart for my heart to be that open.
Well, that goes to that thing I was talking about some months ago at this point, I think, but that like I was having trouble like knowing that I was having emotions if they weren't negative emotions or challenging emotions. Like I was only able to recognize that I'm feeling, I'm putting air quotes up, when, you know, if I could name it, it's like I'm struggling or I'm in pain or I'm sad or I'm angry. But if I was just feeling joy, I was, oh, well, that doesn't count. So I feel like it's related somehow, like that you, in order to feel open, you have to have it proven to you through the channel of struggle or sadness.
No, it's not about, it has to be proven to me. It's not that at all, actually. It's more, I felt his heart and I felt my heart, and they connected and talked to each other in a really open way.
Yeah.
They were just together. But that was because I was more open than usual because I was crying. And I'm like, couldn't it be that he could just show up here and I could be like, hey, buddy, and just open my heart without sobbing?
Right.
And
so
then,
you're still coming through that channel though. Right. And that's the challenge is why does it have to go through the breakdown?
Yeah.
Like that, I think that's what I was saying, not proving, but like you were responding though to the heart open came, it sounded to me like, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the heart open came from his supporting you through your challenge.
No, my heart open came from crying. And then,
oh, and it wasn't that like you got turned on because he was so awesome?
No, the heart open of me came from me crying. The sexual turn on came from his heart being open in response to my open crying heart and him being nurturing. So
yeah, I think I'm saying that same thing. I just didn't say it right.
So great. So my point is, I would like to just be able to be that open all the time without it having to be like, I'm desperately sad right now, and therefore my heart is fucking open.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, how I have a curiosity just how that is for other people. Like, are there people that are so tenderhearted all the time that they're just there always? And I have a couple exes I can think of who I think are more that way than I am. Like some really gentle, wonderful men I've dated who.
Have you ever tried, please, I mean, I don't know, I'm just shooting in the dark here, but have you ever tried just, you know, you go over to Newman's house and you're like chilling and then you're like, I want to get horny with you. Hold on. Let me open the records or let me get to that space. Like, do you feel like your heart is open when you go to your spiritual place?
It is, but it's more open to the divine.
It's a different energy.
Well, it's open to God. It's not necessarily open to him. Like it would, and it's not even necessarily open to me. Like it's a different kind of open.
Yeah.
It's not the emotional open of I'm sobbing. And so I'm really like open. Let me ask you directly, and we'll ask Amy if that's what you're doing right now.
I'm just letting her know that we'll let her in just a sec.
She can even, just let her in because I'll ask her this question too.
Hey, here comes Amy in just a second. No. Oh,
hey, you're here. How's it going?
I'm good.
Thank you for being here, dear. I was just singing your praises and we're talking about all the human design things, which I'm going to come back to in a second, because for those of you listening, Amy is in my life, the resident expert of human design things. When I need to refer someone to get their chart done is to you or to one other friend, but usually you. And when I have a desperate breakthrough in my life, I go, I have to know what's in the gates and channels. Amy, say words at me because I don't understand. And she is so amazingly gifted at it. We're going to come back to that in 1 second. But Cassidy and I were just talking about a thing that I want to hear your not human design related, just Amy's personal thoughts on this question. I was sharing with, the thing that happens when you cry.
Yeah.
That's a pretty broad thing. You know that thing? Tears come out of your eyes.
I know that thing.
And you breathe funny and then snot.
Yes.
All right. You know the thing that happens when you cry where your heart is like extra open? Do you ever have that where it's like, I was telling Cassidy how I recently had some lovely intercourse experience, and the intercourse was really lovely because of how open my heart was. And we know this, right, about sexual congress. We know that when our hearts are open and connected to one another, it's going to be more intimate, and usually, particularly for women, although also probably for everybody, if the heart is open, the juiciness flows more, right? Because the sex is more rooted in the heart connection. And I was telling Cassidy how like I had this big cry the other day, and my current boyfriend was just so loving and generous and didn't no judgment, and just like his heart was open and he didn't mind that I was sad. And then we had the best sex ever because my heart was so blown open and we were so connected. So my question that I was posing was, is there a way that we know of, just us humans here talking right now, where we can be just like kind of always cracked open that much, such that you don't have to be sobbing and in a breakdown to have the heart open enough that you can get there? You know what I mean? And then I was thinking, maybe there are people who are just good at that. And I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, therefore not my forte. I have an open heart, but not that it's hard for me to get to where it's that cracked open. What do you think about this idea?
Well, you talking about that is making me think of, I don't remember who it was. It was in some therapy training I was doing at some point, and I was reading the manual for this training, and there was a sentence that said something like, sadness is relaxation happening.
That is my experience of it.
Yes. So my experience of tears, especially the kind of tears that happen after sex or after, are really intense. For me, it happens to like if you've just like run a race or you've just really exerted yourself, like you gave it your all. Or for people who sing, like sometimes when you sing at such a volume or such a capacity, it's almost like it breaks you open.
Yeah.
And I think some of that is actually just the body relaxing and letting go, which in the world that we live in is not that easy to do in most settings. We live in a high energy, high stress, high pressure world a lot of the time. So I think on a pretty subtle or sometimes more obvious level, most of us are kind of tense most of the time to an extent that we don't even realize until you have that release. And then suddenly it's like, oh my God, I can breathe. Like I relaxed, I softened, everything opened up.
I guess that's interesting because that's the piece that surprises me. I'll put it like this. All this damn energy work for so long and all the therapy and all the things has made me feel pretty peaceful and centered a lot of the time, only because I know I know how I used to feel. And compared to that, boy, am I calm and good comparatively. So when that crack open happens to even more heart opening, I'm always shocked by it. Still, as a 900-year-old lady, I'm still shocked that there's so much more openness available. I just wish there were a way that I could just be like, that I didn't have to feel blown open and like uncomfortably raw in order to have that level of openness that provides that level of communion with heart of other person that makes the sex that good.
Yeah, that does feel like a Katie situation. Like that does feel, I mean, I'm sure it's also very commonly held, but like, I'm actually surprised to hear that is such a high bar challenge for you.
Huh.
Because of your access to the divine and the spiritual and your access to other states of being that like I'm surprised to hear that you don't recognize immediately the ability to just be like, oh, well, what if I just go,
I know.
And then it takes a breakdown to get there? Because I mean, I acknowledge that is definitely true for me, but also I've also experienced literally making the choice.
Huh.
And just like it might be through like some effort, but like being able to be like, especially like in sex and occasionally might happen during sex, but then you're like going, wait a minute, hold on, I'm not all the way here. And then doing some internal machinations or stopping, staring into the other person's eyes, whatever it is, and just going, whew, let me get that heart open. But maybe the the crack open that happens with a breakdown is even farther than this level I'm talking about. I think because I've experienced that for sure. Amazing sex after a crushing breakdown. But I think that there's ways to literally just choose it too.
I think so too. I think my personal experience is something like I can choose certain degrees of it. But that particular level that I experienced the other day, that one comes after crying and only after crying right now.
Well, that goes to Amy's thing about sort of armoring up, that we're in constant armor.
Yeah.
I added that word, but I feel like that's kind of what you were talking about, that maybe you have to, like, even with this person that you have grown to trust.
Yeah.
It takes a shock to the system to actually break through that armor.
Yes. And another thing I'll say that makes me sad, maybe I'll get so sad in this conversation that I'll have some great sex later. What makes me sad, and we're coming to human design, you just watch. What makes me sad is that, like, oh no, I lost that thought. It went bye-bye. Wait, we're talking about if you cry and then the sex and then the armoring. I don't know. I guess I'm just still kind of amazed by with how much armor I've taken down, that there are still layers of subtle forms of armor on the heart that just, it's tough to not have them there. And that speaks to my trauma history or my eightness, my personality, or some gator channel in my human design. Who knows? I don't know.
But do you think it would be really healthy or even safe sometimes to be just a warm, soft, vulnerable, open heart all day long, everywhere you go?
No.
That doesn't seem very natural.
No, it's exhausting and not natural. And thank you for that question, because there is a way. I thought of this the other day. I realized, oh my God, I am walking around my life for 25 years now thinking, when I get to where my heart can be open all the time, I will have arrived at where I want to be. And the other day I thought, well, geez, Katie, that's not going to work, because every time my heart is that open, I'm sobbing on my couch. So
to everything, there is a season, right?
Son of a bitch. My whole trajectory of life just changed, which brings us to Amy Siriporn, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, I've tried my best on here to articulately speak to the brilliance of this weird, miraculous system called human design. And I'm such a tip of the iceberg lady level of it that, it's but Amy, I've recently had some really profound experiences in the other realms of consciousness that bring me to even more. It's almost like this. Every woo-woo thing I do and every deep, trippy, meditative, hypnotic, otherworldly craziness I experience brings me more and more back to Ra, the guy who channeled human design. That dude was tapped the fuck in every direction. It's like the way I said it the other day, and then I want to hear your thoughts. I'm gonna stop talking. Was like, I did this thing called QHHT the other day, which is called Quantum Hypnotic Healing Technique. And you do a 2.5 hour interview where you get the whole life story to the person, the facilitator. Then you're on a bed and they hypnotize you in a deep way where you drop into the subconscious, not your subconscious, like the subconscious. And according to this theory and this technique, when you do this, you're tapped into the higher self, God, the universe, the subconscious, and it's all the same thing. My personal experience of it was like the backside of me opened into a realm behind me that I don't generally have as much awareness of in my waking moments when I'm not in the records or transcending time and space. And when I was in that space, what I know from human design about my own way of being and my own gates and channels and all the things was ever more true and available to me and incredible. And I was like, oh, Ra, the guy who channeled it, was open behind. He was open left and right. He was open in front. He was open up and down. That guy was pulling information from the quantum field of reality in every direction, is my theory. What do you think?
Well, there's a really interesting YouTube video. I don't know if you've ever watched it, but there's a video that he did where he was interviewed about his experience with what he called the voice,
right?
Which is what downloaded the whole system into him. And to me, it's actually, I would think, way more of his brilliance if he had made it up himself. I mean, some people are like, didn't this guy maybe he just made all this up? If he made this up, I would be way more impressed than the story that he tells, where he says, I mean, and these are his words. He said that he felt like he was energetically raped. He felt like he was energetically completely beyond anything probably any of us, most of us could really imagine. His whole body was completely taken over, and this massive download of information was shoved into his system. And from what I can tell, it basically took him 20 years to get it all back out and to be able to explain it in a way that we could understand.
Wow. Okay. Now, another friend of mine was saying recently on this point, she was telling me that when the voice came to Ra, I guess it was like on his Uranus opposition, but the planet's Uranus opposition, but standing in the part of the world where the Uranus opposition itself happened, some 80 layers of Uranus opposition.
Yes, yes. And it was the moment of the emergence of a particular star that was discovered at just that time. And it was a convergence of many events. But yes, his Uranus opposition, yes.
Okay. And is it correct to say, can you tell me more about, like, he was standing like in Ibiza, Spain, and where he was standing was relevant somehow with the concurrence of...
I don't know about that exactly, but I mean, he had basically exited society at that point and had been living, and I think he described it for a while that he was living in a tree, like literally living in a tree, but he had left the world, and he had found this sort of ruina, or he was living somewhere near this sort of these ruins, this dilapidated sort of building. And that's where he was staying. And at some point he walked into this building and this thing took over, and he was in this state where, I think one way he described it, and anybody who's listening, you should go watch the video because I'm paraphrasing and probably making half of it up, but he said he felt like all the water was drained out of his body, and this energy, which he could only describe as a voice, which is very interesting, came in and took over for 7 or 8 days. And all of this stuff was shown to him. He carries in his design a channel that's called the Channel of Initiation. It's generally referred to as the sort of mystical shaman awakening channel. And part of that includes this capacity to process massive shock. And he said that he can't imagine he would ever have survived that if he hadn't had that ego capacity to process shock in that way.
That's amazing. Another thing my friend was saying to me the other day was that he talked publicly about, he did copious amounts of drugs during this time, maybe after the voice.
I think before, during, and after.
Okay.
I think he was pretty open to the psychedelic experience.
But that what he had said was that a large part of why he was doing it after the voice, he said, was to survive it. He was like, it was such an invasion and so overwhelming. He had to medicate to a certain degree or he wouldn't have made it.
Mm-hmm. I could believe that. Yeah.
God. Anyway, hearing this, if you're not a human design person, you could think, boy, that doesn't sound like a trustworthy system.
I'm going to stay away from that whole story.
But man alive, over and over again, I'll come back to some tiny little thing I read once, or some friend of mine will say, check out the, Gene Key 3 or read this channel. And I'll be like, oh my God. And then I have to process that one paragraph I read for like 3 days.
Yeah. It's deep.
Yeah, it's pretty deep. How did you get into it? How did it find you?
I was introduced to human design when I had just had my daughter. She was probably only a couple months old, and I was sitting in a cafe, and there was this very spunky woman kind of power walking across the street with her like baby in one of those baby Bjorn sack things on her chest. And she was sort of power walking down, and she was across the street, and she literally stopped, turned, faced me where I was sitting in this cafe, and beelined over to me and a friend and said, you guys have babies. I have this baby. I think they're all the same age. We need to know each other. We started talking. We became friends. And within a month, she said, listen, you have to check out this system. I know there's something to it. My design is really weird and I can't figure it out, but I know that you will be able to figure out. So I need you to go study it so you can come back and explain to me what the hell I'm supposed to do with it. So it was a very powerful invitation. And as soon as she said it to me, I went home and I looked up, and I think Ra's video on his experience with the voice was one of the first things that I pulled up, and I just watched it. And it was this simultaneous experience of, oh my God, I have to explore this. And oh my God, I wish I had never seen this. I don't want anything to do with this. This looks like a wormhole that I'm not sure I want to get into, you know?
Yep.
And
That's how I feel about it a lot. I'm like, I'll just be like, oh God, I can't. If I look at it, it's gonna but so useful.
It's a red pill, blue pill thing sometimes. And it's kind of like, if you want to still be able to eat shit and pretend it's a steak, then you might not want to look too far into it.
And the other thing is, like, I'm already so, which one is the woo-woo one? I'm already so blue pill, red, whichever fucking pill it is.
I don't know.
I'm the red pilliest red pill there is. And still, I look at human design and go, wow.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know what it is? It's his ability, or the voice's ability, or whoever we're going to attribute it to, the specificity, how he could possibly, or a system could possibly be that specific to me and my personal experience of existing. Like, I'll give you an example. The other day, I thought a specific sentence to myself that I have thought a lot in this recent period of my life. It was, let me think if I can think of what it was. It's something to do with, okay, here's what it was. It was something along the lines of, like, I have this thing that'll come to me sometimes where I get this insight about, oh, financial wealth is inevitable for me. Like, it's inevitable. Like, I do well, but like, I'm talking about big level wealth. I'm like, it's inevitable. Now, that's just an idea that comes through that I'll just be like, that's what's true. And then I'll hear the sentence in my head, right? And then recently, our mutual friend said, like, you should look at your blah, blah, blah gate channel, whatever.
814 line 6.
Yes.
Yes.
It's okay. So the cross that I'm entering with my Uranus, whatever, I read that 14.6 and it said that literal sentence that had been going through my head. Oh, financial abundance is inevitable for you on this gate channel. And that has happened to me, the literal sentence thing, 6 or 7 times with human design.
Mm-hmm.
I open a book that a guy wrote a long time ago somewhere else, and he has written down the sentence that's going through my head right now. How?
Yes, I don't know how to explain it, but it has that quality to it where if it's not your moment yet, then you'll read it and it will just sound like gibberish. It'll sound like a riddle, or it'll just sound like weird words that are mashed together, but don't make any sense. And then at some point there's a moment that comes and all of a sudden it's just like, oh my God, that's what that means. I know what that means. And this is it. Oh my God.
And
it's like a time bomb. It's like a time bomb. It comes in, I think from many of us in the beginning, it's sort of like, I don't know. What is this thing? I don't know. You know, I'm not sure that I want to buy into this whole thing. And then at some point over time, it's like the bomb goes off.
I also find that I have little bombs. That for me, it comes to me in layers.
Yes.
Like the fact that I messaged you recently for that Uranus opposition reading, it was like nothing, everything in my system said, right now, Amy, Uranus, now, go. Like I needed that right then, which by the way, I have that whole gate channel about the now. Everything is the goddamn now for me. And I'm always trying to plan shit. And there's no planning. There's only the goddamn now. But that's in my design. Anyway, can you tell us a story of like, I have so many questions for you. I love talking about this with you.
But wait. Before you do, Cassidy, do you know about this system?
I've heard it plenty from Katie on the podcast, but I have not had my full chart run. We've theorized. We've done lots of sort of ballpark theorizing about my basic type, but I don't think we've ever actually run it.
Okay.
I see a conversation that needs to happen in the future.
Okay.
I'm being sent to Amy soon, is what I'm hearing.
We're reeling you in.
Reeling me in. We spend sort of equal parts talking about Enneagram and human design on this podcast, of which I at least am a vaguely, partially knowledgeable, like barely any, and I get information from other people.
Okay.
I mean, I know more about Enneagram than I do about human design significantly.
And to be clear, we don't just talk about human design and the Enneagram, but he's saying
Yes, they've
as
sort
far
of
as like, things that affect our personalities and the ways we interact with the world, those are the sort of two main like personality realities that we discuss, I feel like.
I see. Okay, cool. Okay, good. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know. I don't even remember what we even theorized my basic framework type would be.
I wouldn't even begin to try. I don't know. Generator, but that's all I got.
Yeah, that's, I think, as far as we got.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
I'm wondering, Amy, like, could you share maybe an experience of maybe one of the earlier or one of the biggest bombs that went off for you with human design that made you go, holy fuck? You know what I mean? What, in other words, like what got you hooked? Because there was the initial lady, right? And she said, do the thing. And you looked at the thing and you went, oh, fuck. And then, I don't know, do you have any memories of like, there was this specific thing that happened that blew your mind or?
Well, I think one of the things that happened very early on with some of the first readings that I had and the first little bit of research that I did was that there were certain things that the system was acknowledging in me. Things like my sort of flexibility of identity or chameleon-like nature or extreme range of energy output, like can be extremely energetically productive and extremely exhausted and empty. There were certain things like that the system not only named, but they framed it in a way like, and this is natural and not a problem. And I realized, and it really struck me that it took many things that I was in therapy, I was in training to be a therapist at the time. And it took many things that I had spent many, many hours trying to understand, find the origins of, fix, transform, make better. It took many of these things and just said, and this is natural.
Okay. I have a question.
Yes.
But here, I'm putting a pin.
There was a thread underneath of it, which I've also found in certain therapy modalities and kind of certain healing and spiritual modalities in general that I really love, which is when the orientation is that there is nothing broken in you. There is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing to fix. If you don't love what you are, if what is natural to you doesn't work, it's just because you either don't fully understand it or you haven't found your right place yet. But everything in this world has a nature and has a place. And if you wake up to that and you learn how to accept that, you will love your nature and you will find your place.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I have a sort of, okay, it's funny. My first thought in response is I have a challenge to that idea. But then even as I start to form that challenge, I realize, yeah, but that could be in my design. In other words, my challenge to it would be something like if there's nothing broken or anything that needs to be healed or fixed, my entire life's work of having done all this healing would have been useless and had no purpose, which frankly, I'd be willing to face that. If that's true, that would be difficult, but I'm okay with facing difficult shit. But what I would say is that, like our mutual friend showed me something in my chart, my human design chart that I'm sure you could speak to more elegantly than I can, but it was something like something about you'll always take everything through the spirit. You want to take it through the spirit. I don't know, something like that. And I was like, yeah, that's what I do. I take every single thing through the spirit. And then when I do that, I get all this healing that happens. And then I realize what more healing once happened. Anyway, my point being, healing doesn't have to negate what you just said. In other words, let me see if I can form this. I used to think I was doing healing work because there was so much wrong with me. Then I realized I'm doing healing work because there's a lot of injuries in my system. I have a lot of injuries and traumas to my system, but the healing is turning me into or returning me back to my wholeness. It's not fixing me because I'm bad and wrong. It's healing what's broken or injured so that I can be restored to what I was meant to, what I already am underneath the injuries.
Yes. Yeah. Or you could also, I mean, the the big term that's used in human design is deconditioning, which is basically to say we each come in with a nature that has its own organic, innate way of functioning. And one of the first things we start to meet in material life is all kinds of feedback that says, don't do it like that, do it like this. Something's wrong with that impulse, that instinct, that naturalness that's coming out of you. We don't like that. It needs to be like this, do it like that. We get shocked by some of the feedback that comes into us. And then that's where we start to form strategies, compulsive coping strategies to try to be accepted by the forces around us. So in human design, the concept, what you would probably call healing, one of the ways it's looked at in human design is that our work is really to just decondition. We're just deconditioning from the dysfunctional, compulsive coping strategies that we've all adopted so that we can reveal and unearth what is innate and natural to us and automatic.
Okay. And so what would the human design framing be of trauma? In other words, let's say you're raped as a 6-year-old and then you're beaten up and then you're left for dead in a gutter and then they find you 3 weeks later and then you're raped again and all kinds of bad shit happens. And then you spend a bunch of years like processing that, grieving and healing and getting better. And then you go and you join society because you get better and I would call that trauma healing and integrating trauma. Does human design support the notion that trauma occurs and we have to heal from it? Or you can choose to heal from it?
I think it would maybe a way to say it would be that there are events that occur and there's a process that we go through to process those experiences.
Yeah.
It gets real dicey when we start talking, because one of the big things you'll see in human design is that there's a phrase that Ross said many, many times, that we live in a no choice universe.
Right. I'm familiar with this.
And nobody wants to hear that. And in some ways, we have to play the game that we have choice, we have agency. It doesn't,
right.
Most of us can't really function without that. So on some level, is it right that somebody gets raped or traumatized? There's no way to say that that's a good or right thing.
Oh, I don't. I'm not even talking about that.
On some level, is there a certain no choice aspect to that? Probably.
Yeah, that's clear to me. I don't actually have resistance to that. I'm talking about if everything is nothing is broken, you said, or wrong, or needs to be fixed. How do you frame what trauma? In other words, let me ask what I'm actually asking. If I hadn't done my healing work on my trauma, I would really not be functional with people. And I would really be miserable because I was miserable. So I did all this healing work to be less miserable. And so that I could be with people and have relationships that work. And now I have some relationships that work. So I would frame that as I needed to do that healing work to get okay and to become someone who could decondition even.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And all of that process on some level is probably natural to you.
Yes.
But none of it means that there was ever anything wrong with you.
I agree with that. I think there were injuries that kept me from communion with myself and injuries that kept me from functioning correctly as myself.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And probably there were things that interrupted what would have been your innate natural response and process for dealing with those things that happened to you. Like you've worked with somatic experiencing, right? Like Peter and Waking the Tiger and that the whole somatic orientation, all of that is about things happen, or it's like that story of I'm terrible with facts about events, but there was that story about the kids in the bus in South America where there was a huge bus accident and it was this big traumatic event. In many cases, a lot of psychological perspectives will say people who are able to act, react, or respond to what the traumas that happen to them, people who are able to take action in response to those traumas in the moment, often are able to process through and leave those experiences without big holdovers that impede them in the future. People who freeze or in some way encounter an obstacle, you think of a child who's not able to fight something that is overpowering them physically.
Yeah.
People who are not able to access their natural active response to what's happening to them
Yeah.
are often ones who have something frozen
Yeah.
that's maintained there that then needs to be processed.
Yeah. And that's like, there have been layers and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of that for me. And even as I go, it's in my human design that I would be natural at going to spirit to heal the thing. That's the thing in my chart. It's in there.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, it's just unfucking believable. Cass,
I have a framing question. It's really more about like, it's just that language of, and I agree with the basic framing of it, but the language of there's nothing really wrong with you. And I think it's similar to what Katie's trying to angle in on, that someone could hear that and say, well, it is, I recognize that I constantly have the impulse to punch ladies in the face or to trip an old lady on the street. And if that is true, then there's nothing wrong with that. If that is my human design and that is natural, and then there is nothing wrong with that. So I'm gonna let go and allow that to be the thing I do. And I know that that's not what it's saying, but it's possible for someone to hear the idea of everything you are is right and good and nothing is wrong with you, and then say, okay, great. So my inherent nature is to punch old ladies in the street.
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with semantic, moralistic language, black and white languaging.
Exactly.
Because, you can take anything and use it as an excuse for all kinds of things or to argue whatever. It becomes a semantic argument. So, which is sort of irrelevant until you're dealing with something real. And then once you're dealing with something real, if you bring to me a person who's saying that's the truth of who they are, then yeah, let me have a conversation with them. Let's find out.
And then you can be like, actually, that is not the core of your truth. Probably.
It was probably unlikely, but maybe, I don't know. There are a lot of things like you can look at the way a lot of things are described. And this is something that, Gene Keys, I appreciate. And I do like a lot of what Gene Keys is. Human design, I think a lot of the reason people have a hard time with human design is because there's so much in it that seems dark and difficult. And I think one of the things that's actually beneficial about that is that it helps to break our moralistic, semantic, black and white mental process, which wants to say, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. Have your heart open all the time. That's the way to be a good spiritual person. The moralistic nature of things that we get into and the way the mind creates so much mess and so much interference with that. It's not to say there isn't a place for laws and rules and guidelines and all that stuff, but that's not everything. And sometimes there is a place for the things. It's what I said at the start. To everything, there is a season.
Also, it makes me think of the thing where Cass, I haven't even, I don't know, you could say more expanded view that resonates with what we're talking about, which would be like, maybe that old lady needed to get punched in the face from a cosmic perspective. We don't know what her path is, her karma, and karma might not be a word human design includes, but we don't know what she's holding that punch then releases. We don't know when her time of death was planned. We don't know anything. So to moralistically say no one should ever punch an old lady in the face, of course, none of us here is going to go do that. And we're not on this podcast encouraging anyone to do that. Please don't sue us. But we don't know from a zoomed out, bigger perspective, like anything about what should or shouldn't happen. We make up things about it's right and good to be liberal and blah, blah, but we're not actually, that's something we made up. About what's about see, because good, bad, right, wrong comes back to judgment. Now we're in judgment of what's right and wrong, and now you're at the center of the universe rather than the universe is universing, and we are expressions of it, which is a different framing. Which brings me to a friend of mine looked at my mother's human design chart with me once, and I have to tell you, this is right on this topic, and I'm glad you asked that, Cass, because there's a lot to say about it, and it's a really interesting topic. So my mom is like if you ask me through the filter of my filters and my limitations and lenses, I would tell you she's a very difficult person with whom I had a very difficult relationship that was so difficult, in fact. And failed all the things therapy could give it and couldn't become positive and loving, such that my best, highest choice for me was to end the relationship. So we don't communicate now. She would like to communicate. I learned over 15 years of trying everything else that's possible on earth, that doesn't work for she and I to know one another. So the most surprising thing to me happened when my friend said, just out of curiosity, let's look at your mom's chart. My mother, this gave me profound empathy for her. Her chart is fucked up. Like it says in her chart now, and of course that's a judgment and I'm aware of that. But what I mean by that is in a more subtle, articulate way to say that. It literally says things in her chart like you will be unable to hear the thoughts and feelings of others. You will be critical continually and shaming of others. You will close your heart and never open it again and then not understand why people don't want to hang around you. It is all there in her chart, meaning, and then there are like all these splits and bridges that don't happen. And if she doesn't meet this right exact one friend at this right exact time, everything doesn't work, which happened to her. My point is like, that's her karma, for lack of a better word. That was her incarnation choice. That was her, however you want to frame it. It's like written in her fucking human design chart that she would be the specific kind of asshole that meant I couldn't hang out with her anymore, which what do you do with that? Because in other words, oh my God, it blew my mind that it was in there because it gave me deep empathy for her because unless she was going to get on a real consciousness path and really wake up, there was no way around it for her to lose her husband, to lose her kid, to be alone. There was no way around it unless she was going to wake up, and she wasn't going to wake up. And even that was in her freaking chart. No waking up this time.
What end would it serve her? For example, if somehow you're able to convince her to say, hey, here's your chart. So I now have that information that feels very deterministic, right?
Yeah.
That says, this is what it is. And we're in a no choice universe.
Amy, yes.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
What do I then, to what end do I now have that information? Great. I have it. Now, what do I do with that?
Yeah,
why does human design serve you to know it?
Yeah. And I would frame a slightly different, I have the same question for you, but slightly different. And I just want to put it out there now since he just asked that. We're putting you on the spot, girl. Making it work.
I am not challenging it at all. Let me be clear. This is actually a positive question. Like, I want to know now, now, okay, I have this deterministic information. What do I do with it?
That's funny. Cassidy doesn't like to challenge people. I'm like, cool, this is a challenge. Prepare to be challenged. Cassidy's like, I'm not challenging.
You know why?
Not a challenge.
Because I hate devil's advocates. And I don't want to come off as a devil's advocate. Because the devil don't need no advocate. He's got plenty of shit he's doing on his own.
But Katie, you got the channel of struggle, right? Then you got the gate of opposition.
Yeah.
That's she's an 8.
That's part of how you learn and engage with life. You wrestle.
No, I know. I'm good. Anyway, my point is this. My framing of the question would be, sometimes people have said to me, and I really want to hear your thoughts on what Cassidy just said, but I have to add to it and just ask. People have said to me, well, it's in my chart. Like he said, it's in my chart. So I'm just kind of a dick sometimes. And I go, because I learned how to be less of a dick. So I know it's possible. So you don't get to be predetermined to be a dick and then just be like, sorry, I have the gate of aggressive being a dick at you.
Well, sure they do. Sure they do. Sure they can.
Yeah, but not. And then that's the end of the conversation. I mean, they can, but then they're a dick.
To you.
Okay, so I'm going to stop. You say more.
Well, maybe they're a dick to you. Maybe they're not to somebody else. Maybe you don't like them. You're not on their fractal. It's the term that's used in human design. You don't get with them. Your response is to reject them. You don't have anything to do with them. But that might be a frequency or flavor that is serving something else somewhere else.
But I have people on my fractal who are clearly on my fractal where we rub each other the wrong way at certain moments. And when we when we talk through it, we both get back to our correct behavior. Like when we're being in the not self, either of us, we fight. And then we both come back to ourselves, our actual deprogrammed selves, and we're good. So if that person were to say, yeah, but I don't have to do any work or come back to my self, I'll just be in my not self because it's in my chart.
Yeah, but do they say that to you? These friends you have that you struggle or
yeah. they've tried that, and I've called them on it and been like, that's some bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been like, good point.
Uh-huh. So that sounds to me like that's the mechanic you have with them. That's part of the nature of the dynamic of that relationship. Kind of underneath the question, the way you're asking it, it makes it sound a little bit like if we were all evolved, we get to the place where we wouldn't fight and we wouldn't be not self and we'd be connected and our hearts would be open and everything would be good. What human design might say is, there's a gate that's called the gate of conflict and friction. And part of what it says is that there is no progress without friction.
That's true.
So there's no babies without the friction of sex.
Yep.
So there are there may be certain conflicts, certain tensions, certain struggles, certain nastiness that are required to get to deeper levels of truth and intimacy.
Yeah.
That's part of it. I think the problem with what I sense and I hear in so many practices and teachings that I am so grateful to feel very liberated from through human design.
Yeah.
Is spiritual materialism and spiritual morality.
And could you define those for us? Yeah.
It's better to be the love, the light, the good, the peaceful, the open heart, the blah, blah, blah. That is not good for everyone all the time. It's
Correct.
just not.
That's right.
It's just not. That's not the world we live in.
Mm-mm.
This is about the Maya. It would be lovely if we were all just radiant beings of light, like those cocoon aliens from that movie Cocoon. Remember that movie when they caught the pods that come out of the water and then their sex is this like bursting sort of joining of light. We'd all like that. I mean, it sounds good, but it's not real. Life is messy. Things get dark. Violence is necessary sometimes. Intensity is necessary sometimes. Conflict, friction, shadows, all of these things, they exist.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's then a good idea to use what I'm saying right now as an excuse to be an asshole.
Right.
I mean, you can do whatever you want. It's your life. But there's light and dark for a reason.
And what would you say the reason? I understand you and I'm not in disagreement with it, to be clear, but what would you say the reason is? Because of the nature of needing friction to create, that light and dark are both required?
You need contrast and differentiation to experience anything.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there'd be no point in being here and having any experience at all. We would all just be angelic, radiant beings of light, and there would be no earth plane. What would be the point? So yes, it's all a journey. Yes, it's all a movie in progress. It's it's a Maya. There are all kinds of illusions. We can never grasp the ultimate truth of anything. I love that phrase from Access that everything's the opposite of what it appears to be and nothing's the opposite of what it appears to be. Anytime you get close enough to the true ultimate truth, you're either go crazy or you'll find you're in a territory of complete and total paradox. So,
okay. Yep. I had a realization. I hear you. I had a realization the other day where I went, okay, boy, the concept of contemplation from Richard Rudd, how he defines contemplation. So I'll say this for the listeners. This guy, Richard Rudd, who I don't know what the verb is, channeled or taught or created the Gene Keys. What would the verb be? Would you say teaches, built, created, channeled? We don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway. Created. Yeah. Mm-hmm. His definition of contemplation is anytime you have resistance anywhere to anything, like let's say you read a thing in your human design chart and you go, I don't want that. He would say, sit with that resistance, bring kind of the light of consciousness or the love of your heart or a smile, the energy of a smile. We were talking about this the other day on the podcast, to that resistance and let that integrate it into your system. Like sit with it, contemplate it, meditate with it until it breaks open into not resistance. I find a lot of value in that practice. Sometimes I do it with divine light. Sometimes I do it with parts work. And sometimes I do it with just the contemplation, sit with it, feel it, and then it integrates. I had this, I'm trying to find words for this. I had this realization the other day where any problem I ever have ever for the rest of my life, all I have to do, sit down, feel the resistance to it, let that integrate, and then I'll make some choices later. In other words, I can trust that the integrated me around a topic will make a choice that will probably not cause me harm once I've integrated charge around it.
So you just said choice, and that's, I feel, for me, what is at the heart, at least like when people challenge, push back on, like, great. So with the Enneagram, when I try and sell them on it, they're like, well, great. So it's deterministic and it tells me what I'm going to be. So why should I do anything? What's the point of learning it? And I always just say, well, when you understand the source of what you're, of, you know, of your motivations and of the reasons that you do things, you then have greater choice around whether or not you want to operate, whether you know, that when you understand the source, you understand you can make, you have the power of will to make choices to go in that direction or to go against that direction. And I don't know if that's, I still don't know, like, what do you do? I'm gonna just ask you directly. How does human design serve you in your life? Like, what does knowing this stuff do for you?
It helps me relax and accept what is, which is exactly what you're talking about, Katie, because you can't know how to deal with anything if you can't actually see it for what it is. If you can't see what's happening for what it is, you are living in your own mental fantasy game and probably acting in ways that don't make sense to other people and don't actually feel ultimately very good to you and don't lead you to a life that feels healthy or fulfilling or natural. So part of what, you know, one of the phrases that's used with human design is that it's called a way of being able to see the mechanics of the Maya. And it's almost like science in that way. It's like, if you understand how gravity works, then you stop spending your time trying to defy gravity. If you understand how certain mechanical principles work in terms of what our bodies are endowed with, what our themes and tendencies and characteristics and traits are, it's not so that some God somewhere is trying to put you in a box and say, you're allowed to do this and you can't do that. It's so that you can understand the underlying mechanics of what is going on here so that you can see and accept what is, and then you can listen to your own nature to know how to deal with that moment by moment. And the mind, what the mind will keep trying to do, which is part of what I hear and feel in this conversation, the mind will keep trying to take it to a place where now what can we decide about how we're supposed to behave so that things turn out the way we want them to be, which is good and right and light and true.
Yeah, that's good.
And that is not the way it works.
That's
That
right.
is not something that the mind can do. It's not something that it can do very well. So part of what, getting back to your question, Cassidy, is part of what human design points to, and this is what I think is so funny about something like a human design reading, because often what will happen in a reading, if it's done well, is you'll have an analyst or a reader, whoever it is, describe certain things to you in a way that feels very intimate. Like I was doing a reading with this woman the other day, and she's like, seriously, did you read my diary? Like, this is disturbing. I feel like you read my diary. And it's so funny because for me at this point, it's actually very impersonal. It's almost not a big deal on a certain level. It's just reading a map. It's literally just like reading a map. And so I don't take for granted how intimate and intense that can be. But in some ways, all of those details, one thing that it does is it recognizes something in each of us that makes us say, oh my God, there's been this thing in me that I've been trying to change my whole life. I've been fighting against. And now you're telling me, even like with what you were saying, Katie, about your mom, now you're telling me I cannot fix the bond with my family. It is irreparable, it is impossible to fix it.
Right.
Or it's impossible to change it. It is what it is. Whatever it is.
Right.
All of those details. And one part, what it does is it recognizes something in us that allows us to relax and say, okay, fine, I surrender. This is what it is. It couldn't have been different. I couldn't have changed it.
A perfect example of that is when you talk about for example, my gate of struggle, where it's like people would say, you've done all this spiritual work. You should be warm and fuzzy and nice to everyone. And I'm not at all.
Yeah.
And like dick jokes are my favorite and stuff. And I keep saying to people, you keep misunderstanding the purpose of spirituality. It's not to become one thing that a guy said in a book about what you become. The guy said you become right and sweet and good and inclusive. That's what a guy said somewhere in some book, and he had a hat on, and I guess people believed in him, and he probably had some gates and channels that made him pretty persuasive. But it's to become you and to be okay with you, to be good with you, right? But then what I find that people need is they need words around, they need descriptions of what is you. So if I say, Cassidy, go be you, human design would give you words and tools and descriptions of what you is, Cassidy, that are quite different than what me is. And if you had those words, your mind would explode with amazement about, holy shit, that thing that I've been trying to change forever is actually just how I am.
Then you get to find out now what happens when I stop trying to resist, control, destroy this thing in myself. Now what happened? I mean, think of all the things in nature that are so fucking weird, like the praying mantis that eats the head of the whatever mate, or the Venus flytrap, or all the weird shit that exists in nature. It all has a purpose. It all has a function, at least. So what happens now if I stop resisting, like for you, Katie, if I stop trying to make myself not be oppositional? If I just accept I'm an oppositional person. Opposition is part of how I find purpose and meaning in life. Opposition is part of how I challenge the things in my life to find their deeper purpose and meaning and truth. Sometimes that feels good. Sometimes it feels rough, but it is what it is. So human design will point you to say, here's your nature. Now what happens if I tell you through looking at this chart, here's where the natural intelligence of your body is, your system. Your system is designed to have its own consistent sense of intelligence through these particular access points. Now, go play with it. Go play with it and see what happens. A lot of people will take something like human design and turn it into another dogma, morality, belief system. Oh, you're a generator. You're supposed to respond to life. You're not supposed to initiate. It's not about that. It's if you're a generator, I'm going to say you're designed to stay connected to the raw, energetic response to life that arises out of your body when you encounter something in the real material world. Now go play with that and see what happens. And part of you might say, well, I don't want to do that. I want to come up with great ideas in my mind and go make them happen. Cool. Go do that. See how it turns out.
Yeah.
Whatever you do, pay attention and watch.
I'd have to say something humbling and activating and amazing for me about human design is when I was struggling with this thing about now I'm in a box and I, like you were saying, Cassidy, it's predetermined and I can only do these things and da-da-da. To me, it's not that. It's that because I am oppositional in nature, when I saw a bunch of this shit, I went out and did the opposite of everything in my chart because I was like, fuck you. You don't tell me who I am. And then it didn't go well for me. It went bad. And then I started to be like, all right, well, in this one way, I'm going to play with the human design thing and see if waiting to respond is actually more effective just because I feel like it. And then it was more effective, a lot more effective. And so then bit by bit, I started to go, okay, I am not required to do anything. I'm not now in a box of control. But when I listen and try these things that it says will work for me, everything works. And when I do the things that aren't in my design, nothing works. So for me, because I'm a like realist, practicalist person, I'm like, my main question is always like, does it work? Does it work? I mean, if it works, do whatever the fuck you want. But if things aren't quite working, you might want to look at your design to see like, oh, if I did it like this, it would probably work. So that's a different framing rather than saying you're in a deterministic world and you're trapped and you have no free will.
Well, I actually really appreciate everything you just said, Amy. Really, I had a sense of that, but I just wanted to kind of eke it out to kind of lift out the idea of like, you're still going to live and do shit. No matter what, you don't just go, I live and accept and turn into a blob. And you might, but probably not. I don't sense that your relaxing and accepting turns you into amoebas. Like you seem like a person, you're wearing earrings, you've got hair, you're going to go dancing, whatever. I don't know what you're going to do, but you exist in the world. So, but that knowledge has served you perhaps to allow you to exist in the world, for lack of a better word, more in alignment. Perhaps, we've talked about alignment and flow a lot on, and like, I know for myself, like some of the struggle with being a 3 on the Enneagram, when I first sort of got aware of it, it was like, oh, yuck, I don't want to be that. And then it was more like when I do see it in operation, the best versions of it are when I can go, yeah, your existence is determined by other people's perception of you. Great. That's very empowering, and not to go, that's bad, but to go, okay, and now I can make choices based on that knowledge, and I may resist it, I may push against it, but generally it's going to be better off when I make choices that are informed by the awareness of that basic nature.
Yes. It's very Taoist in that way, I think. It's very much about, it's not about trying to understand the nature of things so that you can feel powerless. It's understand the nature of things so that you know how to dance with life in a way that's actually interesting and fulfilling. And so that you can feel, awake to things as they are, and you can interact with them in a way that feels natural. And it makes things so much simpler.
I feel like this whole conversation is really just, all I can do with it is go, as I'm listening to us all talk now, I'm so aware of how theoretical this all sounds and how abstract in a way. And the problem of that is easily solved by get a reading with Amy. like
this is really just an infomercial for Amy's business.
One big infomercial, yes.
Yeah, no. And I know that's, of course, there's that layer where it sounds like an infomercial, but there's also I actually mean it quite sincerely, that once you have your first reading with whoever the hell you do it with, but I say do it with Amy, your mind will be so blown, and you'll feel so seen and surprised. You'll feel like she's been inside your diary, that it will, if nothing else, prompt you to ask some serious questions about the assumptions you've been making about yourself and reality and what's good and bad. Seriously, it will prompt that in you. And if that's not valuable, I don't know what is valuable in reality.
I'm just going to say, if we do want to go recording today, which we may or may not, got about 45 minutes left or 40 minutes left. Just planting that in your head, Katie.
Yeah, I see the time. I've been thinking about it too. I don't feel any need to do it, but I'm open to it, deeply open to it if Amy feels called and moved. Amy and I actually just, if I may,
sure, yeah,
we just actually did a big reading healing for her, as it happens before this. But yeah. I mean, but I also love getting in the records and just being like, let's ask about this stuff. It doesn't have to always be like, what do I do with my life? And what's the meaning of the things? It can be like, how many aliens are in my backyard? Or I don't know, whatever the fuck we want, how's my grandma? And is she dead? Where did my wallet go? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, yes, I'm open to it. There was one thing that I did want to mention just to kind of close the loop on this particular thread of the conversation, because it kind of goes back to what you had asked. And, I had said, I think sometimes the purpose of knowing something like this is to recognize something in us that allows us to relax and accept more of what is. But I do think there also is a way that the point of getting into all those details is not necessarily to peg you as anything, but it's just to acknowledge something in you that feels so true that it opens you up to the possibility that there could be some guidance here that you could play with that might serve you. And it might be worth. So sometimes I almost feel like I don't need to detail. Sometimes people get to the end of reading and they'll say, you didn't tell me anything I didn't already know. And then I can say, cool. See, how many more times do you have to pay somebody $200 to tell you shit you already know?
Girl, do you know how many times I've said that to people in my readings? They'll be like, well, I knew that. And I'm like, so what are you doing here, bitch? Go live your life.
Go live your life and see what happens. And, go on your own ride. So that's really what oftentimes a lot of those details will do. Is it affirm something that then says, see, you already knew. See, that you saw it all along. So now if you don't trust that in you, there's no amount of there aren't enough sessions in the world with any practitioner that will convince you to trust yourself as much as experimenting with following your own sense of the truth. And if you go play with that, it's only through experience that you will gain trust in yourself. So you got to be willing to go live, to go try it out. Most of us mentally We want proof. We want to know what's right. We want to know what's true. We want to know how to do it right. We want to know how to get the goodies. How do I need to behave and whose rules do I need to follow in order to get the thing that I want to get at the end? No, you got to just let it all go
and live.
Take what you can, go live, go find out. What something like Brian will say is, if you do it like this, it's going to look like this. If you do it like this, it's probably going to look like this. Now, I don't know what that's going to feel like for you. I don't know what that experience of either of those is actually going to feel like for you. But when you then go live and you realize, like exactly what you were saying, Katie, damn, she said, if I do it like this, it's going to be like this. And if I do it like that, it's going to be like that. And I tried it. I tested it. It's a scientific experiment. And now I found out it's true. And then do what you're going to do, live your life.
Yeah. It actually gives more choice and more options, even despite the paradox of being in a no choice universe, which we could talk about a lot. We could really get deep into that. Like, yeah. Cause like, what does it mean to be in a no choice universe? In a way, I feel the more I've sat with that question and that idea, the more liberating it's become.
Yeah.
I had so much resistance to that idea initially. Let me tell a quick story. When I was first getting sober, which I'm not now, 100 years ago, I was sober 15 years. And this friend of mine who was, okay, let me think about how to tell this. Well, let's just say, so she was in Al-Anon and I was in AA. And AA is like, don't drink no matter what, because you're all fucked up about drinking. And if you drink, you're going to die, which is true for some people. I think they need to not drink alcohol. And I needed to not drink alcohol for a lot of years. And then I didn't need to not drink alcohol anymore. She was in Al-Anon, which is for friends and family of alcoholics, which is more about like, stop trying to control the alcoholic because you fucking can't. Focus on yourself. And it's kind of the basic Al-Anon thing. She and I would go back and forth about this idea over and over again. She would say, because in AA, the third step is we made a decision to turn our will and our lives, our will, what we choose to do, and our lives, what's occurring, to the care of God as we understand God. Made a decision is step 3, to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as you understand God. Now, there is a lot in that sentence. What does care mean? What does God mean? How do you understand God? What does turn over mean? What is your will? What is your life? There's a lot of questions in that freaking little tiny step that people go, yeah, I just did it. I turned my will. I mean, there's so much to unpack in there. Okay. And she and I would talk about this because it's a topic that comes up a lot in 12-step meetings where people go, well, how do you know what God's will is? And I kind of went to 3 healing schools to try to find out. And now I do human design stuff to keep learning. But anyway, she would say, God's will is what's happening. And I would say, yeah, but what about the heroin addict who the more he does heroin, he's dying? If he keeps doing heroin and choosing to do heroin, he's going to die. And is that God's will? And she'd say, yeah, because it's what's happening. And I'd say, hold on. This guy came to an AA meeting or to an whatever the fuck, NA meeting, and he wants to not be shooting heroin. So if I say to him, it's God's will for you to not shoot heroin, is that incorrect? And she'd say, I don't know if it's correct or incorrect, but whatever is happening is God's will because it's happening. And I would always say, I don't agree, because that guy doesn't want his heroin addiction anymore, but he's having trouble stopping. So I think it is God's will, AKA that which serves you better. It serves him better to stop shooting heroin if he wants to be alive on earth. And so for me, if it serves you better and serves the world more, that's God's will. But to her, God's will was whatever is happening. And we went and we had a really fun, I liked the debate, of course, because I'm me. I liked being like, you're, and then we'd fight about it and it'd be great. And she'd be like, I don't like all this opposition. I don't want to be friends with you anymore. And I was like, cool, you got to go. So that's what happened. And so peace and blessings. And so what am I saying about that? What I'm saying about that is, in a way, I kind of feel like both things are true. Like
God's will for you to fight for something better for the heroin addict.
But what would you say to the question, if he keeps destroying himself, but he doesn't want to keep destroying himself, which choice is God's will? Or can we not even frame it that way?
I wouldn't frame it that way at all.
How would you frame it?
I think it's kind of tricky to talk about God.
You think?
Because we're still framing it as this individual determiner of thing. By saying God's will, it humanizes this, like, I now decided that this heroin addict should keep doing heroin.
Yeah, I guess it's a little easier for me to grasp if it's connected to something like it's the nature of things. Like it's the nature of what is, or it is the nature of what is happening right now. It's like if you take a seed of a plant that could have been nurtured and given all the nutrients that it needed, and it would grow into a really tall whatever, and it would fruit in this particular way. And that was the blueprint for that plant and whatever. That's the nature of it. But if you take that seed and you put it in a desert somewhere and you deprive it of these 4 basic things that it actually really needs to grow and thrive, then it's going to kind of turn sideways and it's going to grow like this. And it's going to have, instead of 10 fruits, it's going to have 1 fruit, and or it's not going to fruit at all. It's only going to have leaves, or, that's that. There's a dance thing going on. There's a nature thing going on. To me, I really like nature analogies because it takes that sense of personification and intent and morality out of everything. Very difficult to talk about God without getting into some sort of morality. And then you get a bunch of humans trying to play God. And that's usually very unfortunate. It's usually just a mess. So part of what surrender and no choice, I think, does is it puts us in a place that says, you are not God. And I know there are a lot of spiritual things. It's like, I am God, God is in me. That could be a thing. But if we say you're not God, kind of like the way you said it was relaxing or liberating, Katie, to have the sense of you're actually not writing this script. You're actually not producing this movie. It's already been written and the characters have already been cast and the set has already been built. And now all there is for you to watch the role you get to play, watch the movie unfold. The concept in human design is called passenger consciousness, which is this idea that the intelligence of the body is here. If you were going to assign godliness or intent to the universe, you could almost say that it comes through the natural intelligence of our bodies, showing us energetically or emotionally or instinctively, whatever your orientation is, showing you what is healthy, correct, and natural for you. And the purpose of our minds or our consciousness is to get to watch the ride that the body takes us on through the expression of its nature. That could feel on a certain level like, well, then I feel like I'm a victim or something. I feel like I don't have any choice or agency. I want to write my own movie. I want to be this kind of character, and I want to live in this kind of setting, and I want to be this kind of hero. To me, it's always funny. Like I'll have people come in and say, well, can't your chart change, or can it be different? Or what if I do a lot of work on myself? Maybe it becomes something else. And to me, the underpinnings of that is usually this sense of, I don't like this thing, so I want it to be something else. And to me, it's like, if you haven't given it a chance, if you haven't taken some time to really, it's like if you look at a plant in its infancy and you say, I don't like that plant. It's like, you don't even know what that thing is yet. It's 6 months old. You don't even know what that's going to look like when it's full grown. You don't even know what the unfolding of that is going to be. Don't you want to find out? Aren't you curious?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. If we go back to the heroin addict for 1 second,
yes,
just to close. No, that's great. Just to close that loop, I would say maybe this is the different framing of it. It would be something like, it is the nature of the heroin addict to shoot heroin. When one has fully become a heroin addict, it's the nature of the heroin addict to shoot heroin. And if the heroin addict detoxes in a place where people detox, it is the nature of the body to sweat a lot and be uncomfortable. And then after 6 years of not shooting the heroin, it is the nature of that person to join society and probably have a job and maybe have a family. Like, it's the nature of things that things will probably go this way if you stop shooting heroin, and they'll probably go this way if you keep shooting heroin, rather than it's God's will for you to not shoot heroin and it's not God's will for you to shoot heroin. The less judgmental framing and the more human design framing might be more like, well, the nature of things is that you'll die eventually if you shoot a lot of heroin, and you'll live longer and maybe have some other experiences if you don't.
Yes. And if you trace it back further, if you go way, 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 way back, which a lot of these sort of therapies would do, you'd say, why'd you go after heroin in the first place? Who offered it to you? Why'd you want it? How'd you find yourself in that place where that's what you wanted to do, or that's what you needed, or that's what appealed to you?
Right.
And I think with a lot of those events in our lives, when we trace them back, we can see a certain kind of setup.
Right.
And,
What's your point about that?
That we live in a pretty sick society in a lot of ways. We live in a world that is not oriented toward nature in a lot of ways. So we can say, now I'm going to contradict what I've said, because it sounds like I'm painting the world out to be a bad place. I'm not saying it's a bad place, but it's a tough place. And I think if you trace each person's story back, what a lot of people find is that they can see where the motivation was behind whatever it was that they did and what moved them to that. And I think when you understand that, you see if that was driven by a pain, a hurt, a conditioning, a confusion, if it was driven by an inner knowing, if there was a moment when you were about to do something and there was a voice in your head that said, don't do that, but your friend said, yeah, do it. And you listened to them instead of listening to yourself. And then that took you somewhere. I think all of those threads of our experience, we can trace back, and you get to see how were things functioning in that moment for them to turn out like this. It's not a moralistic thing either. It's not saying it's good or bad or right or wrong that it's this way. It's just a way of understanding the mechanics.
Yeah, I think going back to your plant metaphor, which I really like, because it takes away the moral ethical thing, is like that same plant. Look, if this plant gets planted in a desert, this is how it's going to turn out, because that is the nature of this plant in this setting. This plant require this. So in a sense, like planting in a desert is like resisting its nature, or it's like fighting its design. You don't want to fight the design. Yeah, this plant is, so we're not going to place a moral standpoint on a Venus flytrap, but it kills. Yeah, that's what it does. So yeah, I really appreciate putting it in the sort of natural world. It's it's not even human design; it's just design.
It's just nature.
But that we fight our design much of the time, or we resist our design.
Yes.
And that's where suffering occurs often, possibly.
Yeah. Or you're born as a hummingbird and you want to operate like an elephant. Mm-hmm. Your life's going to look pretty ridiculous, and you're probably going to feel like a failure if you're a hummingbird and you're trying to behave like an elephant. If you're willing to accept and see what you are, and you're like, oh, I'm a hummingbird. Well, let me understand how hummingbirds thrive.
Oh God, that brings up like the whole education system, how it's like kids are like taught how to climb a tree, but you're like, but I'm a fish and I'm a failure as a tree climber. So, oh well, but the school is only a tree climbing school, and everybody has to go to that school, and that kid is a fish, and a fish can't climb trees.
No. Mm-hmm.
So you have failed.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, try being an oppositional female in America.
Very, very basic things. Very, very basic things that our homogenized conditioned world makes very difficult.
Oh, exactly. Totally. Well, out of a need or a desperate attempt to control, I want to give an example of something to kind of even further what we're talking about. Here's an example, like a more specific example of like, I will often, as a manifesting generator, feel like in the beginning of the day, I want to do these 9 things. And also I'm on the left angle cross of industry. So I'm like, do, all the doing. And when I get through the first 3 things that actually need doing, like when I get up in the morning and I look at the 900 million choices I could start with, because I'm self-employed, so nobody's telling me you have to do this at this time. I go, okay, so I have to do these 50 things today, or these 10 things. Usually, and I'm certain that that's what needs to happen. Emotionally, I'm like, fuckity shitballs. I'm anxious in the morning because I got these 50 things to fuck. And there's this pressure in my body to do them. As a manifesting generator, that's a thing that happens for me. When I get through the first 3, I have a whole different orientation to reality. And all of a sudden I'll look at my list and go, actually, those 6 of those don't need to happen till tomorrow. And 3 of those don't actually exist. They don't need to happen at all. So my point being, if I were going to stay married to my first thought in the morning about how the day is going to go, I would be stressed out all the time. And I used to live that way. I did live that way. I used to be like, but I have my list and I stick to my list. And if you don't stick to your list, it's too stressful even talking that way. Now it's like, I do the first thing that's clearly evident. It's like toothbrushing. I really want to brush there's this film on my teeth. We're going to brush the teeth. Then by the time I'm done toothbrushing, it's like, well, my feet are cold because the heater isn't on. So turn the heater on. And then I'm like, I've warmed up a bit. I got that appointment at 11 in this other part of town. I got to put pants on. And one moment at a time, what is actually required is revealed, but only through presence and connection with the self in the moment. Anything, if I were to stick to my brain's idea about how it's supposed to go, like I'll even take today, for example, I was like, I'm going to teach from 10:30 to 5:30, and then we're going to go right into the podcast. Okay, so we got to move it back. We'll start at 5, and then Amy comes on 5:30, and we'll go to 7:30, and then at 7:30, and I had this plan of my brain said, well, then what we'll do is this. And I went, I know myself now. After 6 hours of teaching and 2 hours of podcasting, I have no idea what my body's going to need when we're done with this. So we're going to find out at the end of it. And lo and behold, already I'm like, for whatever reason today, I have been centered and calm all day for whatever fucking reason. And now what I thought in the morning I was going to need at 7:15 when we're done with this, I don't need that, but I sure thought I would in the morning. Now I'm going like, well, I don't know. I'm feeling kind of awake and peaceful and I don't feel drained. And so maybe I'll run over to do you see what I'm saying? So it's all about deconditioning ourselves. Well, I have had to decondition myself from being married to any idea ahead of time. Mm-hmm. I can hold the plan lightly in my head. Like maybe I'll still want to go to the cidery after, maybe I'll still want to, but we don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you still live in a 3D world in which you have relationships that you choose to maintain. And because of that, you might have commitments that you have to live up to. So you're still going to balance some of that. But you also might get to the end of the day and be like, I can't live up that commitment because I don't have it in me. Or you might totally have it.
Well, I mean, I feel so at choice that I would even cancel our podcast if I need to, or not teach that class if it really, really had to happen. But does it really, really have to happen? I'm just saying only the moment can dictate. Do I even care to uphold that, quote unquote, what you said, social agreement with whoever I have relationships with? Moment by moment, it depends. Like another example is I was invited to a gathering recently and I was like, oh, no, I'm 100% going to that. And then the day of, nothing in me was willing, ready, or able to go to that thing. And I know myself now because what I used to do is force myself to go because I used to be excited about it. Yesterday, I was excited about this. Therefore, I'm dead to the world about it today. But I used to be excited. So I'll probably be excited when I get there. For me, when I do that, I'm pushing against the grain of the moment and I'm never happy. I get to the thing and I'm like, I didn't want to be here. I don't want to be here. Now I'm being an asshole to these people because I don't want to fucking talk to them. Had I stayed home and honored myself, in the moment, they would not be cranky with me now because now I'm being a dick because everything would be going better. So even social obligation and relationship upholding, it's like not necessary, maybe, except for when not.
Have you guys ever gone swimming with dolphins?
No, I want to.
Oh no, we have to take you.
Yeah, let's go.
I moved to Hawaii after college and I was living in I went to college in New York City and it was really intense and exhausting. And then the series of events came up. I got to move to Hawaii after college and I was very sort of like dark and broody, melancholic. I hate life, sort of East Coast intellectual at that time. We get to Hawaii and everybody's all like sunshine and surfing and rainbows and dolphins. And I was sort of like, I don't get this dolphin thing. Like people would talk about the dolphins. It's like, who wants to? Anyway, the first time I had an actual, it's a long story. I'll tell it briefly. I had this moment where I had this urge to jump into the ocean without kind of really knowing that much about the ocean. And I got in there and I got in pretty big trouble pretty fast. I was getting really pulled. I was exhausted. I actually don't know how to swim. It was an impulsive decision that wasn't that bright. And that's not my strategy for how to navigate through life, by the way. So I found myself in the ocean and really scared and really out of breath and starting to have the thought like, oh my God, this might really be bad. And then all of a sudden, my whole body got really relaxed and I started to feel like I was floating. And I kind of like, I calmed down a little bit. I looked around and there were 3 dolphins swimming in a circle around my body. And I had my head leaned back and all I could see was like an eye going by and then the next eye going by and then the next. And my whole system was like, that's when I knew, okay, dolphins are magic. I agree. It healed me. But if you ever go swimming with dolphins and you see that there are like, 10 of them that you can see sort of hopping along at the surface. When you look underneath, if you look underneath that, often, at least the ones that are in Hawaii, there are hundreds of them underneath, and they are swimming at high speed and they're interweaving with each other. And there are moms and babies, and some of them are having sex and some of them are going here and they're going up and down. And it looks like it would be chaos. Like it looks like, wouldn't you need some sort of control or order or map or directions or traffic lights or something to make sure that they don't bump into each other? But they don't. They swim together at very, very high speeds in patterns that are almost hard to detect. So I think in this thing that you're talking about, Katie, I think sometimes mentally we think that everything will be better if we organize and control everything. And there are certainly many things in our material world that require organization and control and commitment and all of those things. And there are people who are built to do that really well. There are actually people who have designs where they're very well built to say, this is what my will is connected to. This is what I'm committed to. And now I do it. And I do it because I said I'm going to. And that's how they're designed to function.
Yeah.
But for many of us, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
And if everybody were connected to the intelligence of their own system, I think that we would find that in certain ways, a lot of things could function and move in very natural ways, and it wouldn't be a problem. It actually operate from a place of being, a place of awareness, a place of communion, a place of recognition. And we would be able to see, you're a struggler. I'm not into struggle, so let's not hang out right now. Cool. I don't hate you. You don't hate me. It's all okay. There's love, but I don't want to be near you right now. All right, fine. We'll check in later. There are so many things that could be so much easier. And I think part of understanding nature also is that it's something that helps us to take things a lot less personally and to approach them with a lot less of a need to control.
Yes. And you're reminding me, that's it to a T, I think. And thank you for that framing of it. You're reminding me of when I went to Mumbai in India. Have either of you been there?
Yes.
Okay. Cassidy says no.
Apparently
Amy says
I've done
yes.
Nothing. I haven't swum with dolphins or been to India. Go on. Mumbai?
So in Mumbai, I mean, the traffic patterns aren't they aren't a thing. There's no lanes in the streets, and everyone is in outdoor tuk-tuks that have no walls. They're like motorbikes with like a roof over them, but no walls, or they're on motorbikes, or they're in cars, and they're an inch away from one another, and they're going 90 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour, all next to each other. When you get to like a big crazy intersection where there's 4 different roads going in 4 different directions, you just kind of figure it out because there's no fucking rules. And you're in the back of the tuk-tuk and you're on a motorbike with a tiny roof. And this 12-year-old kid who's driving your tuk-tuk just gets into the middle of the intersection and just cuts off a big, huge bus and an 18-wheeler because that's how you had to do it at that moment. Mm-hmm. Everything is instinct. And sure, there are accidents, but I read about this after being there for a while. They have fewer car accidents than we have. In Mumbai, there are fewer car accidents than in Los Angeles on any given day of life existing. And in Los Angeles, it's very ordered. It's very tidy. We have all the lanes. You go this way, you stop at the stop sign. How do you explain that? Except it's fully chaos. And a lot of white people, we go there and we go, and for whatever reason, I was in a state of mind when I went. I was just in a good space, and I fucking loved it so much because it flew right in the face of any righteousness about anything. Mumbai says to righteousness, fuck you, watch. And you just have to deal. And like homeless people shitting on the street in front of you, next to a cow that is eating a plastic bag, next to the richest man in the most beautiful Lexus you've ever seen, and a beautiful castle that you're not allowed to go in because you're not rich enough. All of it is within 6 inches of each other. And you're like, if I took my pants off right now,
no would care.
And spun around in a circle really fast, shitting as I went, just diarrhea spraying around the whole thing. Not only would no one care, it almost wouldn't register as a thing because it's already, the chaos level is so high.
But it's somehow in sync with itself as well.
It works. It all works. And I was just reading something in, I think the Gene Keys actually about, I guess the original word, the root word of chaos and the root word of, oh, damn it, I'm going to forget the second one. Anyway, the point is that chaos has gotten this negative connotation put on it by our projections, but blah, blah, blah. We all know that there's order in chaos. Like the universe is chaotic. If you look at physics, it's all chaos. And they're learning more and more about that now. But does our body fall apart? No, we maintain the boundaries of our face and bodies, even though we don't even understand where quarks are or how time and space works. And anyway.
Are we really just going to leave in the past the fact that Amy just told us that her life was saved by 3 magical dolphins? I've just been sitting there like, we just blew right past that one. Like that wasn't the fairy tales, end all fairy tales.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, man. That is a crazy fuck. What happened in the end? Did you just float to the shore or what happened?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the reason that people drown because they panic.
Right.
Yes.
You panic and then you can't breathe. And then you're really inefficient in how you use your body and your energy. And then you panic more and then you can't breathe more and then you drown.
Yeah.
I was sort of, my system was ramping up into that. And when they surrounded me, I became entirely calm and relaxed. And then I just sort of and then they left. And then I still struggled a bit, but I had enough relaxation to be able to just move and get myself back to the rocks and climb up there. And thank God that I did that and know that that wasn't bright and to believe in the magic of dolphins. So, but
may we all.
May we all. I think part of what it really did for me too, because I have a kind of mind, you can see this in my design. If you read my design, it'll say I have a very arrogant, know-it-all kind of mind that believes it can rival God in knowing the truth. And it wants to get after the mysteries in a way that it can go too far and get me in trouble. So part of what some of these experiences, especially energetic, physical, or even like the experiences you were naming in the very beginning, Katie, when you were talking about the sex, and it sounded like you were talking about if you get really relaxed and you get really heart open, then you're able to have like this incredible experience with the physical that's very different. For me, sometimes I'm so mental that it's actually going through a physical experience or an energetic experience is what sort of like wakes me up to the fact that there's not just my mind going on in this.
I have the same. I have that as well.
So yeah, I kind of need like that first round of the sex to then relax and open up. And then I can have the next round of the sex to have the thing that you were talking about. But anyway, that aside, experiences like that and getting to see things energetically and the mechanics of things like I feel like I've gotten to through this has really, I would say, humbled my mind. And an experience like that, like with those dolphins, really snapped me out of my know-it-all, arrogant, but miserable kind of East Coast intellectual mindset. And then I had to admit, which is also like, I think some of what happens sometimes with things like psychedelics or experiences that we can't explain.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what shock does for us.
Yeah.
Or what a new experience does for us. I think it opens us up to the fact that we don't know everything.
Yeah. Humility is a good one. That's another one that I get too a lot out of the stuff. If a guy, how long ago did Ra channel all this?
It was late 80s.
Okay. If a guy, how many years ago is that?
30 some years ago.
30 some years ago, a rando in the world could channel this shit that knows me that specifically. I am clearly not at the center of the universe. But I had a similar experience with my Sufi sheikh, whose name was Sidi. And then we'll wrap up this episode now because we're not going to keep you forever. I promise we'll let you go here. But just to look at the ways that the systems with their respective challenges can overlap and where the teachings overlap. When I first took a hand in the Sufi way, meaning I said to a group of people I barely knew, yes, I do this now. I pray with you this way. They said, okay, now that you've taken hand, you call CASSIDY the guide. They don't in the Sufi way call them a guru. They call him a guide. You call this guide who is a perfected master, and he lives in Jerusalem, and he's going to tell you your Sufi name. And your name is eternal. And your name is something that only a perfected master can know, because he's tapped so deeply into the mind of God that he could see your name. So a few days later, and there's an emissary, a person in the Sufi path who calls for you and then takes notes and then calls you back and goes, here's what he said. So one day I'm driving in my car, I've taken hand. I don't really know what that means. I'm just like, I was like taken with this whole thing. It just took me. It was very interesting. Anyway, this woman calls me, hi, I'm Jamila, or whatever her Sufi name was. Is this Katie? I said, yes. She said, we've spoken with CASSIDY and we have your name. And I said, cool, thanks. And she goes, are you driving a car? And I go, yeah. And she goes, you're going to want to pull over. And I go, sure. And I don't pull over because fuck you.
8.
Don't tell me what to do.
Well, yeah, I just straight lied to her. Yeah, I pulled over. No, I didn't fucking pull over. She says, CASSIDY says your name is Sabira, which means, and the name in the Sufi way tells you your deepest challenge in life, and that which when you master it or surrender to the truth of it becomes your greatest gift for people. I go, all right, yeah, sure, whatever. She goes, your name is Sabira, which means patience and endurance. I'm sorry, patience and perseverance. Probably 20 minutes before that, I was having a conversation with a friend wherein I said, if only I could wrangle in my patience. And I keep quitting everything too soon. I'm telling you, 20 minutes before, I was crying about how my impatience was causing me so much problem and how I never persevere with anything. And this woman says this to me. I start to sob so profoundly. My heart lit up with this, what felt like fire in my heart. And it was the light of the Sufi way burning away all the shit in my heart. And I said, you'll have to excuse me. I have to pull over. And she said, you told me you had pulled over. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Anyway, so I pulled over and cried for a long, long time, because if a man 3,000 million, how far the fuck away is Jerusalem? Miles away, could say, I know you, here's your name, bitch, and be so correct to what I was dealing with exactly right then I am not in control of this reality. Magic is real. Time and space fold in on themselves. And I got a fun ride ahead of me where I'm going to discover some weird ass shit. There you have it. Thank you for being here with us, Amy.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure. Really
So fun talking to you.
Great to talk to you both.
I feel like we could talk to you for hours, but for now, I think we'll let you go.
Let's wrap it up. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. Have a good night. Take
I'll
good
probably
care.
be calling you, apparently.
Wait, before we hang up, could we say out loud to the listener your email address? Could you?
Oh, yes. My site is holo, HOLO, humandesign.com. And if you want to email me, you can email me at holohumandesign@gmail.com. If you want to reach out, feel free. And I know a lot of people in the human design world too. So if there's something in particular you're looking for, I can probably point you in the right direction.
And will you forward the link to that particular YouTube story?
Yes.
The one that talks about raw stuff? And we'll put it in the notes of this episode. So
okay, cool. Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, love.
Good to see you.
Have a great night.
Bye.
Take care.
Yes. Well, you probably have to pee. I have to pee. It's a good reason to sign off. Do your work, Katie.
Or don't, because it's a no-choice universe.
Right. Fuck it. Bye.
What are you asking for? All of the answers? Say what? All of the answers? Yeah, all the answers.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. We'd love to hear from you. Please email us with your questions so that we have questions to answer in the Akashic Records. Our email address is allanswerspod@gmail.com. That's allanswerspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to find us on Facebook or Twitter, it's @allanswerspod, @allanswerspod. Thank you. I just yelled into the microphone and you just kept going like nothing happened.
It was fine. You actually turned away. It was nice. It wasn't too brutal.
Well, we're taping a podcast and I'm yelling. I'm an asshole. Back to this.
That was a Sounds Awesome production.